because she was putting biological male rapists into female prisons where they could attack.
Look, he might as well just be Fox News at this point, you know? You can tell now why, when he brought Steven Crowder on, they were so friendly to each other. You know, he's like, my name's Steven. I do enjoy quite a bit of what you do. I enjoy your show. I don't agree with everything you have to say, but certainly, you know, I'm quite fond. He's like, oh, I like you too. Yeah, we like each other. Piers Morgan's had quite a year, in, debating a ton of different people.
Well, joining me now is
and I almost feel like in some ways he had some kind of a sick humiliation fetish. I mean, I don't think it was an actual fetish. I think it was just playing out that way. I think ultimately Piers Morgan just has like an admiration problem, like a deep narcissism and a deep desire to be liked by everyone, by all, like, you know, in the media class. He wants celebrities to love him, but he wants all of them, even like the super famous ones who might be really like, you know, for Palestinian liberation. He wants to be able to be like, well, I speak to everyone. Yeah, me and Bassem Youssef we're best friends. Did you not see the two specials? I was like the one where he was like capable of doing so many incredible little bits, like getting you to try olive oil from the West Bank and realizing how delicious it was. Yes, and then using that as an opportunity to point out that Israel has actually uprooted 600,000 olive trees, which is really fucked up because those are trees that are very indigenous to the land, kind of thing. That's fucked up. That's not a good thing, Piers. But anyways, in his last couple ones, this one was from 5 days ago, he's gone to his safe space. He wanted a safe space. He was not enjoying a lot of these battles and now wants to talk about transgender extremism, the extremist of trans people.
TV contributor Paula Rowan Adrian, a political journalist Ava Santina, and international editor Isabel Oakeshott. Welcome to my dazzling pack. All right. Paul, I can see you.
You can see.
Raging to go. Off you go.
Ready. Well, I'm intrigued that you've decided to open this really serious and sensitive debate by suggesting that somebody referencing themselves as a cat equates to a child who is struggling to understand.
I didn't. I actually separated the two things.
How to identify.
Well, you heard me separate the two things.
They're two completely...
Yeah, but Paul, hang on. Sorry. You heard...
Whoa. That was a hell of an initial hit. Yeah, just right out of the gates. Damn. Yeah. Piers. Hold on. What did we do? We talked about this. We said you said you'd be nice to me.
Let me separate the two things. I read out again and reminded people of the absurdity of a teacher calling children despicable for saying it was ridiculous to allow someone to be a cat. And then I said, but there are serious issues involving people who are seriously going through the issue of transgenderism for real, not just a fad of being a cat. Well, and they're different things.
They are completely different things.
So don't misquote me.
But you're opening with that as if it's somehow something to be dismissed and somehow to be treated as a joke. And this is my problem with the guidelines.
Not to be taken as a joke, no.
Which we have...
By the way, so just so we're clear, the cat story, completely debunked. That was one of those weird, like, it was an Ouroboros of, like, misinformation. It was one of those things that was initially being done by an account. Libs of TikTok was really spreading a conspiracy theory that had already been debunked, by the way. The reason that there were certain photos in schools that had kitty litter was, unfortunately, in case of a school shooting, in case kids needed to perhaps go to the bathroom inside the classroom. That's the reason why that was there. It's actually pretty dark and disgusting that it was twisted into. This is because children can now self-identify as cats and use kitty litter in the washrooms. That part was all made up. Libs of TikTok spreads it. Then it gets to a point where, like, you know, Joe Rogan's referencing it. Then Joe Rogan suddenly says that he knows this is true because he heard it from someone, like a friend of a friend kind of shit. And then Libs of TikTok is like, Joe Rogan verifies the kitty litter story, cats, kids identifying as kittens and all this kind of stuff. And then afterwards admits the whole thing, he just made it up because he can just do that, because he can just, you know, 11 million people listen to the podcast and he can just be like, that never happened. And it's like, whoa, okay, wild. Okay, well, glad this one instance you've corrected yourself. It did have some pretty horrifying repercussions, but is anyone else going to along the Ouroboros of...
Waited 5 years...
Parents being informed about what their children are doing at school is not a joke to me. I'm a father of 4 kids who've been through school. I want to know. If one of my kids suddenly decides to identify as a cat, I want a phone call from the school, right?
That's not happening, though. Yeah. It's just not happening. Like, if you're like, you know, I want to know if my child turns into a unicorn on campus. I need to know about that. I need to know if they transform magically thanks to watching My Little Pony over and over. I need to know. It's like, but that's not that doesn't happen. You're living in a fantasy world. You've believed all these weird conspiracy theories spread by bigots who are known for lying and lying all the time and lying for money. That's what they do. They lie for money. And then when they're corrected, they're like, oh yeah, well, Media Matters is going to have a day with this. Yes, they are, because they're admitting you just lie for money. But this has real world consequences. It can get people fucking hurt and or killed.
Waited 5 years for these guidelines. These guidelines start off by saying it's about parents being first. We're putting parents first.
Yes.
That's wrong, Piers. It's not about parents. It's about the child. It's about the vulnerable child.
You're a parent,
who needs,
right?
Absolutely. Who needs the adults around them to support them during this difficult period.
I don't know who she is, but she is absolutely crushing this from right out of the gates until like every single moment. Yes, amazing.
For them. What it doesn't need is for the child who is vulnerable to be told, no, the parent comes first. That's the wrong approach.
No, the parent does come first until the child is an adult.
So Paula, if you want your child to be given medicine at school, if you want them just to have some Calpol, you have to get permission. You have to go through a process. I have to sign a form if I want my child to have Calpol at school for a headache or a sore throat or whatever. It is, to me, it is.
If your child was born diabetic and they required insulin in order to regulate their blood sugar glucose levels, if that was the thing, and you as a parent started to say, well, I believe that's witchcraft, it is, and I don't want my child to take that, and they were getting progressively sicker and sicker as a result of you being like, I'm going to deny them something right now. That's comparable to the situation you're trying to craft. This isn't like, oh, well, if my child wants an Advil, I should be able to sign off on it. And it's like, yeah, we're not talking about like secretly giving your children like medicines. We're talking about if you already had, say, the approval of a doctor, and a doctor has stated, hey, this is going to help improve the quality of life of your child, and they should be taking this. And then all of a sudden you were like, no, I refuse, because I don't like it. I don't understand it, and I don't like it.
Negligent and bordering on abusive to allow schools just to honour a child's wishes to be known temporarily as something else without involving
for them to be made comfortable. This is where we become confused with being child-focused and saying that the child gets everything they want. That's not what I'm saying. Being child-focused does not mean that everything the child says is right. But what I'm concerned about is that saying parent first means that anything that the child says is always going to come second to what their parent wants.
So do you think parents should be cut out the loop? Let's make this a lot simpler then.
Yes,
do you think it's okay for parents to be cut out the loop? Because that's at the heart of this.
Absolutely not.
That's at the heart.
So they should be involved then?
A parent must be
they should
involved.
be told.
So a parent must be involved.
No, because we're missing out on a really important cog here. So even if the parent agrees that the child would like to use a different set of pronouns, the school does not have to abide by that. And it would only be exceptional circumstances where the school actually accepts it. So at the moment, there'll be a lot of children around the country who will be going into the Christmas period now, not knowing how they'll be identified when they go into school in January.
You know what? They get identified as boy or girl.
Right, but
like the old days.
Why do you feel that?
I just don't want to learn anything new. All these terms for gender fluid. What even is that? Agender, non-binary, gender trash. Things. Boy or girl. It used to be pure.
Don't go in and say you call me they like Sam Smith. No, those days are done.
That's your pronouns, bruh. I'm gonna call you he, him, because I know that's what you want to be referred to. It would be weird if I walked up and I was like, you're a lady. She, her, Piers Morgan, lol, haha. You'd be like, well, what are you, 12? Right. Yeah, it's childish to do that. Really childish. We don't do that anymore. We understand. We've been using pronouns our whole fucking lives. Yeah. So if you are referring to someone who wants they, them, super easy for you not to be a dick. Holy fuck.
Piers, you're shouting.
Because it's so stupid.
It is
You're shouting.
ridiculous.
Shout about the fact that the criminal stats tell us that hate crime against transgender people have gone up 11% in 1 year. Over the last 5 years, it's gone up 186%. So what we need to do...
I think that's awful.
So what we need to do is prepare...
Any hatred towards trans people is awful. But why?
Okay, good. Oh, we have a baseline. We got a baseline. Nice. We'll start there, and we can grow. Juste Belmont too. Thank you very much. Abusive parents should always be told their kids can be scared to be themselves. Piers Morgan, 2023. Accurate.
Why do you think that there is so much mockery of trans people compared to 5-6 years ago? I'll tell you why. Because they are fighting ludicrous battles, the trans lobby, over...
No, you. The problem is you, sir. Yeah, it's a you problem, 100%. Every single person, major media personality who has a huge platform and is utilizing them in the most ridiculous of ways, staging, if you will, these culture war debates as you are right now. Boy, girl, all that shit. Yeah, no, that contributes to an atmosphere of people generally being confused. Cis folk. Yeah, the majority of the population just being like, well, I hear it's a very contentious debate right now, right? Oh, not amongst the medical community. No, actually, conclusively right now, I would say every major medical association in the US of A all agrees on this whole thing. They're not debating one another. They're not like, we need to have a culture war debate, as about the kind of stuff. It's like anything else. Our understanding of the known universe is expanding all the time as we gather new information. We get to make new decisions based on our new learnings. So that's good. It's a great thing. It's awesome. And it actually becomes way more beautiful and complex when you learn that things like both gender and sex. Yes, sex is a spectrum. I know that's weird, it's scary, but it's all of a sudden it's like, but no, there's simply two potential combinations of chromosomes. Is there not just there's XXXY? No, it's actually there's lots of different combinations. We're figuring that out. XXX, XXY. There's can be where someone suppresses a certain hormone, and so the influence of hormones in prenatal development is suddenly going to influence dramatically whether they develop and are seen and identified either as a man or a woman in society. There can be people who grow up that every single person, like Piers Morgan, would be like, well, that's a biological female, that is, because she has breasts and a vagina, a functional vagina. And it's like, well, actually, that person genetically has male DNA. I know, it's weird. If you were to look at their chromosomes, it would show that it actually is supposed to be what you consider to be a man. Turns out, because they were born with a condition that suppresses testosterone, they never developed that way. But again, if you were like, oh, look at her bones, let me see the bone. Well, it turns out that, yeah, that this is neat though, learning this science, it's amazing. And it can really expand the way we understand the known universe. You're really cool with science when you have a headache, Piers. I bet you don't sit there being like, I need to suffer. I bet you're like, Tylenol, please. And then you take it and you're like, oh, neat, that has an effect on my mind and it's making me feel better. I like that feeling. Well, so you accept science. So you like it in some conditions. You just don't like it in others when it suddenly is a little bit more to learn, and there are more than just girls or boys. There are. That's cool. It's fascinating. It's neat.
Things like demanding the right of biological males identifying as trans women
demanding the
to
right
compete
to
in sport against females.
And
the more that happens, and then in Scotland you saw Nicola Sturgeon lose.
Yeah, another very fair point. Demanding the right to exist. No biological.
Lose her job because she was putting biological male rapists into female prisons where they could attack.
You might as well just be Fox News at this point, you know?
Women.
What does that have to do?
You can tell now why when he brought Steven Crowder on, they were so friendly to each other. You know, he's like, well, no, Steven, I do enjoy quite a bit of what you do. I enjoy your show. I don't agree with everything you have to say, but certainly, you know, I'm quite fond. He's like, oh, I like you too. Yeah, we like each other.
When this stuff happens, the real victims are genuine trans people who just want to have a quiet life, who go through a lot anyway, and they just want a quiet time and to be respected and tolerated.
I say on my panel where I'm spreading transphobic fear-mongering to my audience of millions. Oh, they just want to be left alone. No, truly they do. They just want to be left alone. And then there's the radical ones, the radical extremists. I'm holding terrible for the rest of them.
by the Tolerant Society, and I want to take care of those people.
Rally the troops, rally the Conservative troops, and say we're going to fight the next election on the basis of culture wars and trans.
It's not a culture war.
Okay,
to do with it.
It's not a culture war.
I'm
sorry, Paula. I'm sorry, but the issue of biological males competing against biological females is not a culture war. It is an absolute full-front assault on women's rights to
Yeah, lecture those women, those femoids on women. Mansplaining. That's the funniest shit about all the TERF stuff too, you know? You'll always get all these sexist ass dudes, like ones who actually make their entire careers out of being like, I hate third wave feminism, the SJW, blue-haired lesbians, fuck them all. Like those kind of people, all of a sudden it's like, no, this is about women's spaces. This is an assault on the very fabric of where a woman plays sports. By the way, women should not be able to play certain sports with men because they're not as intelligent as we are. You know, sports like chess. Yes, definitely. Darts, certainly. No woman will ever be able to truly compete with a man when it comes to darts.
We meet with that, and I think
why
we're
any
getting
woman
way off the subject
still defends
here.
this nonsense?
We're not
all of
it's
you.
ridiculous to me.
All of you.
We are
off
talking
the
about
subject.
that because it's being dismissed
We're
as
not.
culture
We're
war.
talking about schools here. And
That's true, Piers. Well, how is everyone serving you? I assume some of these guests have to be a little bit more right-wing or in agreeing with you, but I was just like, even the right-wing British woman is like, oh, come on, Piers, that's not the topic.
in my opinion, this guidance doesn't actually go anywhere near far enough.
What would you like it to say?
I don't think it should be. Can I just talk for 1 second here, because I have tried to interject repeatedly and only been talked down. I don't think it needs to be guidance. I think it needs to be the actual law. I do not think schools should have a huge amount of discretion, or indeed any discretion over this. And by the way, this is only a consultation. So we've waited all these months. You say it's years. It's certainly 9 months since Rishi Sunak called for urgent action, and it's only a consultation. Look, for me, this is very straightforward. I do not think children should be encouraged to take decisions that they may come to regret very dreadfully. A lot of this stuff is
So why not look at regret rates, even amongst children, and then in people who had been given gender-affirming care, and look at them, and then look at meta-studies, so you can see across the world, or people who have been given, again, gender-affirming care, how much they regret the act of receiving gender-affirming care. But you could look at over long periods of time as well, and combine all the studies, take a look at the data to understand what's going on here. Because all she's advocating for is certain kinds of people shouldn't have health care. That's what it comes down to. It's like, you shouldn't get health care because I don't understand it. Yeah. And I'm sorry, but like you wouldn't really agree with this. And then maybe I should speak to Pierce and my dudes. You wouldn't really like it if you suddenly didn't get healthcare because you were a man, right? Or you were denied healthcare because you were a man, or you wouldn't even have the same access to healthcare because you're a man, or because you're a man, it's debated on whether or not you should have healthcare on TV shows. Get to watch TV shows, and then you get to sit there, and then you get to sit there watching and watch policymakers make decisions about your healthcare, about whether or not you should have healthcare because you're a guy, simply because you're a guy. It's like, yeah. Oh, what, you were born a man? Yeah, let's debate it. This is a culture war thing. We got to figure out what kind of autonomy you should have based on the fact that you're a dude. Yeah, that would suck. That would be really shitty. No one wants that. So maybe we should stop doing that to trans people. And also, women, all women, you should probably stop doing that to all women. Doesn't matter if they're trans or cis, we're doing it to women too. Women of color, you know how they have less access to certain forms of healthcare, or worse outcomes as a result of being in healthcare systems that are kind of racist and discriminatory. That one too. That one's really poor people. You should probably stop, making poor people have a separate tier of healthcare because they can't afford the healthcare, so they don't even get the healthcare. They don't get anything. You're just like, nope, no, you're poor. Yeah, no. This costs money. You need money if you want to live.
The Tavistock Clinic, right, Ava?
But these are the arguments that were used against children in the 80s and the 90s when we were talking about, whether children could be gay. We were talking about that. It's exactly the same sort of rhetoric.
And remember,
we shouldn't be encouraging
we're talking
them.
about social transition.
Being gay is a sexuality.
No, but
right? Identify.
What is it? Sorry. A sexuality. A sexuality. To be gay, truly sexual.
Crying as a cat is not a sexuality.
No, come on, you know that is a false equivalent.
They're massively
just done
different
that.
things.
We discussed how we were not going to equate that. We weren't going to use the...
Oh, Piers didn't listen. No, Piers is a naughty boy, you see. Yeah, and he likes it because it makes him feel as if he has some kind of moral authority. If you identify as a cat, certainly we shouldn't be entertaining that option. We all agree, right? We are not cats. I am not a cat, for one. Are you cats, ladies?
The cat analogy with this very serious discussion.
At the moment, we've got a murder trial going on, you know, potentially because of a trans child died, all right? You know, and we're talking about bullying.
But there have also been murder trials this year of trans people killing people. So
Right there. Oh, you fucking monster. You ghoul of ghouls. Right there. That moment right there. You are brought up with a very serious point about an absolute and utter tragedy and how the press played a really large role in both, like, you know, dehumanizing trans people, vilifying trans people, fear-mongering about trans people, to the point where teenagers, fucking kids themselves, are willing to commit vile acts of murder. And Piers Morgan, you absolutely play a role in that. Every single people, like, if you are considered a journalist, a member of the press, and you aren't willing to do very basic research on this topic, again, very basic, to the point where a lot of people online are saying, oh yeah, shit, I was wrong. I googled it, and then it just was very, very clear. Yeah, the science on this isn't being debated. It's not a culture war thing over there. Yeah, no, it's quite conclusive. So yeah, we should stop. I don't know, treating people differently. This whole like dehumanization thing has a lot of negative effects. Really can lead to some terrible and grisly outcomes. And then if you're told that, at that moment, that's when Piers is like, well, there are also stories of trans people killing people. Very evil trans people, murderers.
It works both ways.
No.
Right?
Come on.
No, it doesn't actually. Statistically, if you were to look at things like, say, sexual violence, statistically, trans people are more often the victims of sexual violence. You have a higher rate of being biracial of the population, someone who will commit sexual violence if you happen to be a cis man. The majority of people committing that are cis men. It's not trans women, it's cis men who are doing that. So you can look at it very easily. And if you were to simply be like, well, we can go the other way, you know, for all things, really. Anything can be flip it and reverse it.
Because, okay, we can't talk about that specific case, but let's be serious.
You can take out individual stories, of course you can,
if a child
and amplify them.
No, if a child was
bullied...
But
I think both of those are horrific for different reasons. So
what is it?
Enlightened centrism of the highest order. Well, they're both bad. Bad things. Yes. One is bad, the other's also bad.
What's the point?
But trans murderers do not represent trans people. But if a child was killed because they are trans, then that is pretty important.
What's that got to do with the school?
Well, let me tell you what it's got to do.
If the school is bullying them, then obviously that is, that's allowing that sort of behaviour.
Bullying. Yes, I don't see how it's going to change bullying.
We know how important schools are. Of course, they are the locus parenti, aren't they, for our children when we send them off in the morning. We know that. And so what's really important, of course, is that the school has guidelines. But what happens is
rules, not guidelines.
Well, and do you know what? That is where I would agree with.
I like how she's the one complaining, like, I have not been given a single moment to speak. And then, like, every single time it comes to her, she's like, wait, I gotta interrupt here. Gotta interrupt again. Hey, I have something important to say. I need to interrupt.
Because at the moment, we don't have anything watertight. It's very fluid. We have this consultation period. It's 12 weeks. It's a little bit convenient that they suddenly sent out these guidelines when most schools have broken up, when most schools are coming to the end of their holidays. So what they think that they're going to get back, I don't know.
I'll tell you what's been going on, Paula. There are no doubt there are some children genuinely going through transgenderism, right? They believe they're born in the wrong body and they have to be taken care of, cared for, respected and everything.
Again, like he's doing the trans medicalist stuff. It's like, oh, yes, well, there's some people who suffer from the condition known as transgenderism who, of course, need some form of help. The exceptions to the rule, right? It's like you can be trans and you cannot want to transition. You can be trans and not need to transition. What we need is assholes like this to simply use pronouns the same way he always has his entire life and not think that it's a huge fucking ask. I'm not going to use they, them. What? What have I ever used it before?
Support that. But there are a very, very small number of people. What has happened in the last 2 to 3 years, there's been an explosion in people identifying as non-binary, gender fluid, 100 other genders, because it's trendy.
Let them.
It's a fad. And teachers have been produced into going along with this and not telling parents. And it's completely outrageous.
My family are teachers, my friends are teachers, and I spoke to them before I came on this program, and I said, do you have...
Interesting timing again that he's doing this in the middle of us just getting this brand new study. And again, I do like pointing out that in the past we did this thing where we vilified people who were left-handed, right? And then as we told them they were sinistra, if you will, they needed to be beaten and then prevented from being left-handed. And so you need this little moment here. And then when we stopped doing that more and more and more, and you know, there stopped being so much religious puritanism around being left-handed, and that number increased. But then this thing happens where it plateaus, and it's like, yes, and then this is basically what they're represented in the general population when we don't vilify people for being born left-handed. And so this came out. New Swedish trans demographic study. The trans trend looks more like a logistical curve now, leveling out. Observed prevalence of medical and or legal transition was almost at 0.5% per birth cohort for transgender men and 0.2% for transgender women. And then once again, as you'd expect, yes, once there's less social stigma, more people are allowed to transition, more people have access to healthcare so they can receive gender-affirming care if they need it. Surprise, surprise, it begins to plateau. The same thing applies to people who may not know the words or terms that they wanted to be able to use to identify before, that are now using terms that Piers Morgan considers too difficult. They, them, right? So someone can be non-binary, doesn't need to transition, doesn't need to socially transition or want to socially transition. But if they ask other people, hey, by the way, could you please use they, them pronouns? It's really on you not to be an ass. It's not a big ask because you've been doing it your whole life, right?
Transgender children at your school? And they said yes. I said, do you use their pronouns? They all said yes. And I told them about this new guidance. And they said, well, that's unworkable. And why would we do that to a child?
How many have they got?
Yeah. What, how many have they got?
How many trans students?
Very small, each.
Tiny.
But probably one to each
Right,
person.
now what about the people identifying as non-binary, gender fluid, blah, blah, blah?
But so what?
Right, there was one school in Brighton.
Yeah, no shit. So who gives a fuck? What does that have to do with you?
Where there was 1,000 pupils, I think it was something like 300.
Like, how dare you have more language and terms to be able to understand and identify who you are and allow others to be able to reciprocity, that whole thing. How dare you?
Identifying as non-binary or gender fluid.
I don't think
it's nonsense. It's a fad.
I'm sorry, I don't think it is a so what. I think that when people start having actual surgery to change their bodies in ways that are not reversible, that isn't a shrug,
but we're not
so
talking
what.
about surgery.
We're not talking about
surgery.
We're talking about
the Tavistock Clinic was created on the altar of virtue signalling nonsense, and children were being mutilated at that altar, and it's completely.
But that's not true. Again, this has been debunked at this point. This was 5 days ago. This got released 5 days ago. What? Piers, you're the problem.
Outrageous what was going on there.
That's very different to people using pronouns in schools.
Well, it's a slippery slope, isn't it? Once you start to acquiesce to kids,
slippery slope fallacy.
It's wanting the rights to everything, and they rule the roost, and they have the final say.
Their rights to be comfortable in their own body.
Parental rights should be absolutely paramount. Now, there is an exception. And
again, this is just them targeting one group they don't like. You'll never hear Piers Morgan do a special on, like, you know, the circumcision of boys or young men, or how, like, you know, I believe it's over 50% in the United States, or it's just over 50% of young boys are circumcised. It's one of those things where it's like, well, this could be a permanent genital mutilation or the altering of their genitalia permanently. Like, well, what did you have to say about that, Piers? It's like, no, pronouns, they, them.
There's a genuine belief based on teacher knowledge, social services, maybe whatever, of violence towards a child who may say something like that when they go home. That is different, and that's been allowed for in this.
No, it hasn't.
You know what?
No, this guidance specifically says as well, even if it's agreed by the parents and by the school will not take it on.
No, but there's a specific criteria for kids who may be at risk. Right? Teachers will be able to withhold information if they believe a child could be put at significant risk.
Piers,
so it's in there.
But they won't be using their pronouns. Can I just tell you, that isn't unusual. In terms of safeguarding, that's quite normal. Teachers are always very careful to ensure that the child comes first, and if there is a concern about risk of harm, significant harm, then they will, of course, do what they need to do in terms of contacting the appropriate professionals to ensure that the child is cared for first before the parent finds out. That's not unusual. What my concern is exactly what you've just been amplifying.
Two of these guests were absolutely spectacular on this. Once again, Piers Morgan continues the pattern of bringing on people who absolutely school him on a regular basis.
This parental right over the child right.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
no.
Yes.
Sorry.
Absolutely
Yes.
not.
Do.
Yes, until they're legal adults, the parent has the right.
That is our job.
This is why I'm glad we're actually
Do you
having
have
this
the right to
debate,
beat
and
the
it's
fuck out of them?
needed, and the
Do you have
consultation
the right
period
to
is
knock your kid
required.
unconscious?
But what we should not be doing
Do you have the right
is
to make your kid
adding
homeless?
flames to this culture war, because
It's not a culture war.
You are doing that,
It's about
and now
it's about our children.
we've had Kemi
It's not a
Badenoch
culture
say
war.
that there is no child.
Holy fuck, he didn't even like do a little bit of an allude to the line. He just said the line. It's about the kids. Oh, wait, someone think
was
of the
born
children.
in the wrong body. How can you tell me that this
If you
is
had your way, Paul.
By the way, this is about other people's kids, ultimately, because this is the ones you're mad about. Like, unless, you know, I've never heard Piers Morgan talk about how he has a trans child and that he has to talk about those kind of issues specifically because of his trans kids. But, like, otherwise, it's like, well, yes, but no, I want to push legislation on children, other children. Yes, your strangers' children.
Can you tell me this is
Paula,
a
if you had your way,
war?
you'd have kids, young girls at school. I've got a 12-year-old daughter, right? You'd have her up against 6'5" biological males in sport.
Oh, come
You'd have
on.
her having to share the toilets and bathrooms with biological males.
Okay, well, yeah, here's the thing. Maybe people shouldn't be sharing toilets with anybody. Maybe people should just have toilets and you can just put doors on them and then that's the thing. And we don't concern ourselves with what's going on inside that space because let's just let people do their things, right? That could be a whole solution to this problem. Doesn't have to be a whole debate. Do you know? Think everyone can agree on that. Doesn't matter. Cis, trans, just leave people alone when they're going to the bathroom. That's their time. You leave them alone.
This is an unattractive
Right? You'd have a bunch of her
argument
friends
from you.
identifying as
This is
cats.
an
And you know what it
unattractive
is? It is
argument from you, Piers.
licensed chaos. And actually, border.
I don't see him getting better, by the way. I don't see if we see Piers Morgan by 2024 and having spoken and, you know, had the battlefield in the marketplace of ideas suddenly not sounding like this. I think he's more happy to just relegate himself to, again, unscientific fear-mongering based on fairy tales that he heard from Stephen Crowder. Like, yes, kids identified as cats. Not a thing, turns out. Just not, and kids, students, you know, being offered litter boxes to pee on them as cat, not a thing either. Lies, made up lies. Libs of TikTok lied. Joe Rogan lied. They both lied. They've been caught in their lies. It's been exposed. They were lies. You don't have to keep doing this. Unless you want to. Then it's just you furthering the lie for your own fucking thing.
On abuse.
I think it is bordering on abuse. I think that we will look back on this era in future as a period in which we actually encouraged children to become incredibly confused, and it is.
Here's correct. So, I mean, the limits to which Piers is willing to go is that he's kind of like a little bit on the transmedical side where he's like, well, I don't deny that gender dysphoria is real. And I think people should perhaps have access as adults to certain forms of, I don't know, therapy. That's as far as I'm willing to go on this.
Terrible for mental health to keep projecting all this. Oh, you might be this.
Oh, no. It's going to be one of those things where you look back and you just see, you know, a whole bunch of people being bigots. Yeah, being bigots and spreading bigotry, unscientific bigotry. It's been done many times throughout human history. Yeah, absolutely. You know, like phrenology, for example, that whole stuff, or we're trying to have a scientific rationale for eugenics. Those programs as well, similar.
You might be that. Look, the vast majority of people are either a boy or a girl, and they don't need their mind befuddled with a load of...
And we don't need...
But see, no one's denying that. Again, yes, most people are cis. Most people are born cis, and most people will usually identify with the gender that they're associated with at birth. But it doesn't mean that there aren't people who are not that. Then that's completely okay, fine, and valid too. And so then it would be much better if all of us were just better about it.
What we don't need is people like Sam Smith, who started off as a gay man. A year later, he's...
What? What does this have to do with you? Why are you going after Sam Smith? It's really weird to go after them. That's just an utterly bizarre thing to do. It doesn't have anything to do with the cause. Well, you see, Sam Smith started out as a gay man and then suddenly was gay, what, non-binary? I don't even understand. They, them pronouns.
Non-binary. Then he wants to be called they, them. Then he wants to be gender fluid, blah, blah, blah. It is just faddism.
Is it?
or you're just a dick as a fad because that plays well with your base. There you go.
Yes,
faddism.
And he demanded. By the way, let's not forget that this year, thanks to him and his campaign, he demanded the Brit Awards go gender neutral. And what happened in the best individual singer category, they're all blokes, the nominees.
Look,
all men.
On page 1 of that guidance, it questions whether gender dysphoria is even legitimate. It questions whether, you know, someone can be born into the wrong body. And I think
maybe more.
He's interrupted every time, by the way. You know, she was all caring about, like, you know, speaking over a black woman and being sure to be like, I have been trying so hard to be able to get a word in edgewise, and then every single time someone's speaking, oh, shut up.
Question should be asked.
Totally.
They're simply going, I'm a girl, I'm a boy when you're not.
But no one's splitting like that. We're talking about people who genuinely feel like they're born into the wrong body, and you should respect that.
They're all chasing a fad. It's just like in the 70s when David Bowie put makeup on, they all wore makeup. Kids do that. Anyway.
Whoa, Bowie invented men putting on makeup? That was David Bowie, first person? That never happened before in history, not on a large scale, and never again? Okay, all right. Well, yep, that's the only time that's happened.
Suicide, Piers.
Yes, some are.
Also
it's very sad.
Are self-harming, Piers.
Yes,
doesn't mean
I don't.
Oh, it's sad, but he doesn't give two fucks. Again, about doing bare minimum. Like, just go on Google. Takes you 2 seconds, Piers. Piers, you could debunk yourself so quickly. This entire segment, the whole children identifying as cats, the whole pronouns, the whole thing related to gender-affirming care, regret rates from transitioning. Every major medical association in the United States agreeing upon all of this. You'd find it all. It would take very, very little time. But you would prefer to be able to spew this bigotry on your show, even though, yes, it can contribute towards a general toxic atmosphere that is usually the dehumanization of trans people.
And so we need to address this and not come across as if we know
what they're
best.
not getting?
And then he's like, that's...
Because so many kids are being encouraged to identify as anything they like. The ones who really need help are getting...
See, the problem is trans people. Yeah, so the problem, according to Piers Morgan, with trans people who have high rates of wanting to unalive themselves, it's also trans people, because too many people are pretending to be trans because it's a fad, and they're ruining it for the rest of trans people. That's actually what Piers Morgan is ending his show with.
Lost in the wash.
That face says it all.
So you accept that there are ones that really need help?
Yes.
Because so do I.
I said that in my
So do
monologue.
I.
All right.
I did a good thing. I refused to learn anything but a monologue.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Can you please hit the like and subscribe button and maybe leave a comment? It really does help the videos out. But first, the people who produce everything you see before you and make this entire channel possible: Amazing Fletch, Anna Loves Riley, Ariane McCarthy, Cheryl Alvarez, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Hagbard Salim, Multi Mondi, Omni, Peanut Butter Blondie, Political Puppy, Quiet 185, Rachel K, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Ruby K, Cernicus, Spinach Monster, Stellar Vision, Sebastian DeMel, Trevbot.exe, Words Greenwood, and Travis McClinton. And also, thank you to every other person who helps fund this show. Their names are on the screen right now. It would not be possible without every single one of them. We cannot thank you enough. And if you want to join the Patreon, please come to patreon.com/theserfs and help us exist.